Hello and welcome to Real Reflections, Cinema's Societal Mirror. I'm Kevin Vacna, teacher and writer.
I'm Chris Lavinia. I am a writer and filmmaker.
And we're here today to talk about two dystopian films from the 80s and what we love about them and what they said about society then, as well as how they are relevant and applicable to what's going on today in the world around us.
Yep. And we've got two whoppers in terms of movies with a lot of societal criticism and everything. We've got Brazil, Terry Gilliam's Brazil, which I believe came out in 1984, if I'm not mistaken. Remember, he joked that the title was going to be 1984 and a half. And Dead End Drive-In, which is 1986. That's an Australian film.
Yeah, and in with each of these films, one of us was seeing the film for the first time, right? Mm-hmm. So we prepped for this by, each suggesting a film, bringing it to the table, and asking the other to, experience it. So I had seen Brazil, and Chris, you brought to us Dead End Drive-In.
Yes. Which actually I'd only recently seen for the first time myself about a month or so. It was one of those films that I always saw the box art for at like the video store back in the day. So I remembered it. I think finally I watched it on the Criterion channel because it was part of their post-apocalyptic sci-fi collection. Actually, it's funny, Brazil's not on there.
Is it?
No. Yeah, no, I wish it had been. I had to.
We got to write some letters.
Exactly. What are you doing, Criterion? Come on now. But so Brazil fascinated me. It's funny because I would consider myself a fan of Gilliam. I love movies like The Fisher King. I love to even his more recent films like The Zero Theorem. I actually remember seeing that in theaters and liking that quite a bit. So I've always kind of been a fan of his style and everything, but Brazil has been a big blind spot for me, and I was glad to have an excuse really, to force myself to shore that up.
Oh, yeah, and I'm glad to kind of force that upon you because I'm the opposite, where, like, Brazil is that Terry Gilliam film that just does it and checks all those boxes for me, whereas, like, I really wanted to like Zero Theorem because it's, like, it is a spiritual successor to Brazil in a lot of ways, and, like, it just didn't, and, like, what Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus? Like, yes, I wanted to like, and like they don't do it for me, like, but Brazil really does, and like I love it for it, and I have a lot of respect for Terry Gilliam as a filmmaker in the way that all of that stuff comes together. So yeah, right. I guess let's
let's dive into it.
Yeah,
how is it a reflection of society? Okay, so if you haven't seen Brazil, I guess I'll do my best to give a quick recap, which is it follows a kind of middle management type worker for the Ministry of Information, a man by the name of Sam Lowry. I'm forgetting the name of the actor who plays him because of course I am.
Oh, but he's the High Sparrow in that season of Game of Thrones.
Yeah. He's been around.
I'm embarrassed now too.
But it's okay. It's okay. This is our first episode. We're a little raw, but he is pretty much a hapless, mild-mannered government employee type. The film starts off with a completely random it's basically this whole plot is triggered by a computer error or a typewriter error in this case.
A literal bug in the system.
Yes. Wow. I love that. Apparently that was Tom Stoppard's idea, which makes sense. But yeah, so a bug in the system causes the wrong man to be apprehended by the government, tortured and killed. And a witness to that accidental torture and killing is a woman who lives in the apartment above that man. His name was Buttle. They were actually looking for a man named Tuttle, and this woman, who is the upstairs neighbor of the wrongly taken away man, the wrongly abducted man, is a witness and is then a target of the government because she's a witness, and they're trying to cover it up because they don't want anybody to notice that they killed the wrong guy.
Yeah, they won't admit they made a mistake. It's not possible.
And basically, this mild-mannered government employee, Sam, then goes on a quest to try to find this woman and save her because he realizes that he has been seeing her in his dreams for God knows how long now, and he's in love with her and wants to save her. And that's the movie. It's this weird mix of fantasy and dystopian science fiction that just actually ends up working amazingly well.
Yeah, and it does, and it probably shouldn't, right? Because like those fantasy elements that you're referencing, right, are jarringly, visually, tonally different. You know, at least when they're first introduced, right? When the towers start rising and you get the dolls and the samurai. Like, okay, but yeah, even the samurai is so weird.
That samurai comes out. I love it, but it's like
that's a Terry Gilliam thing. That's not a Stoppard thing, right? The samurai, I would guess.
Apparently, it's because he's a big Kurosawa fan. I read that was basically his nod to Kurosawa, which was like, of course, makes 100% sense. Because I don't know how else you justify it in there, but it's. One of the interesting things I've kind of noticed in the current rise of cyberpunk, the popularity of cyberpunk fiction and dystopian sci-fi in general, it's that like people almost miss the mark, and we become so enamored with these near future worlds, you kind of almost want to live in them. Like I've been guilty of that. One of my favorite movies of all time is Blade Runner. Okay, and I'd be lying to you if I said I myself have never fantasized about like basically being Deckard in Blade Runner and living in that world. Because it just, no matter how sad and dark it's supposed to be, it just looks so damn cool. Gilliam does a great job of making the world of Brazil not seem cool. I would never want to live in Brazil's present day, near future thing. It just seems so sad, so bleak. Even the upper crust parts, where we're with his mom in these restaurants and everything, just seems so disorienting and dark. He does a good job of being like, this is what our world is. We need to change this.
Yeah.
No,
like 100%. I agree. And in terms of like I did mention I watched that interview with him, but like it's very obvious in the film, right? Like one of the things is the mundane nature of that world, right? How boring and similar to, how soul crushing that 9-to-5 job can be at an office. Like those are real things that people are dealing with, right? So you don't want to go live in this world because you almost already do.
Yeah. The screens on screens on screens.
So many screens.
Even the way people tend to like always be watching clips of old movies.
Yeah.
In their downtime, it's such a commentary on how nowadays, like they say, everybody just is obsessed with like music and pop culture for the past. Nobody's like, things present seems to stagnate almost.
Okay, yeah.
Everything's based on old IP and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's the whole nostalgia cycle, And like, it's like the bureaucracy of it all, right? Like the villain of the movie is bureaucracy, right? Like, so, like again, if we're looking at mid 1980s, when this movie's being made and written and all of that, right, like there's definitely fears and warning about how progress breaks down, society breaks down with the growth of this middle management, right? Like giving people titles and things just to do it, right? Breaks it down.
You have that character, Jack, who's Sam's friend, that man is literally the embodiment of the concept of like the banality of evil. Like this guy who's so nice to him. We get that first scene where we actually get to meet him, see him at his job, like basically taking the bloody jacket off. And then he ends up being the person who has to, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Brazil.
For a 40-year-old film.
Yeah, exactly. Spoiler alert, but he turns out being the one who then has to torture Sam when he's captured, to ultimately pushing him into the brink of insanity.
Yeah, and like even just given that, right? Like his face is a big smile, right? Every time you see him on screen, up until that final scene with him, and like right, like that kind of society, right? It turns your best friend against you, right? Like it turns your friend into your enemy, your betrayer. And like, that's a frightening message to put out there as well,
The idea, the ending kind of like, it's like how dark is a movie where a guy losing his grip with sanity like that is a happy ending.
Let's talk about the ending.
It's literally so basically it's like he finally gets with the love of his life. And they are quickly torn from each other's arms by these government agencies. And then it looks like he's about to get tortured, but then is miraculously saved by Tuttle and the terrorist group that's been up to this point unseen terrorist group that's been plaguing the film the entire time in the background behind all these bombings. And he's rescued. He kind of gets away. Tuttle mysteriously disappears in a very disquieting sequence where the newspaper.
A man can be killed by paperwork.
Yeah.
You know, like he says that earlier, and then you're like, this is ridiculous, but okay, I'll go with it.
And I guess that's supposed to be our first hint that things are not what they seem. And then he kind of just runs away enough to the point where he gets kind of onto this little shipping container that turns out to be being driven by her, and they're kind of in the countryside, and it's this big wide shot and the music's swelling and you're thinking, oh cool, and then all of a sudden these two faces, the face of was it Helpman and Jack come back in, and they're like looking. It's just like, and Gilliam's use of wide angle lenses is so great, and how disorienting it makes everything like that, close-ups like that, and they're like, oh, he's gone from us, and then he's just got that simple face and the wide shot, and then eventually it moves away and the clouds start to come in, and the Brazil and I guess that's the thing, a lot of people probably will watch this movie and be like, so where does Brazil come into play? And it's just because it's that one theme that keeps repeating. And the music, that song comes up, and the clouds come in. It's like, this world sucks so much that in any other movie, a guy breaking from reality, that's supposed to be the big downer ending. But you're almost like, oh well, good. They can't hurt him anymore
because he's
escapes, off in fairyland.
The only freedom he's gonna have is in his head at the end. And the tonal shift, right? Like from that point on in that third act, right? Like the movie becomes absurd, right?
Oh,
like it's ridiculous. The Robert De Niro being dissolved by paperwork, right? Like it becomes an action movie for a second with the terrorists coming down from the ceiling. And again, the terrorists are air conditioned repair people. Right? Like let's
freelancers basically. Their big thing is that they don't want to do the paperwork.
And they're like, then they pull the rug out from under you, and it's this is just what he's imagining while he's being tortured. He's escaped, but into his own imagination. That's the only real escape that exists in that world, and like it's down, but you're happy for him that he found peace and happiness, even if it's not physical and tangible.
It's a shift in perspective and how powerful that could be. It reminds me of the ending of and the funny thing is, I haven't seen this movie, but I read the original Matheson novel of The Incredible Shrinking Man.
Okay.
And the way that, now again, spoiling a book that's so old and everything, and you should have read by now, but whatever.
How old is it?
It's so old. When it was made, the Dead Sea was only sick. Anyway, what happens is the main character, as the title implies, is shrinking. And it doesn't stop. He doesn't figure out a way to stop the shrinking. What happens is he gets to a point where he starts to shrink to the point where he's submolecular. And he just decides, like, okay, I can't stop this. Instead of being sad that I'm about not seeing my wife anymore, that I'm gone, I'm going to explore this subatomic realm. I'm about to go, like, between atoms now. I'm just going to go off and explore this new world nobody else has seen. Like, he just accepts his fate and then turns it into an adventure. And that's kind of the similar thing where it's just like, well, no, this is just what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
It's,
and, like, that reminds me of what Harlan Ellison said, where he was like, science fiction, but specifically dystopias are inherently optimistic.
Yes,
right?
I love that quote.
There's that underlying optimism even in what you're describing right now, right? There's that optimism.
Because there's always a future.
Yeah,
there's always a next day. And as long as there's that, you could always, there's always a fight to be had. And I guess we could use that to dovetail into the second film.
Yeah. All right, so wait, hold on. My turn.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Dead and Driving. Well, it's only fair, right? Let me see what I can do with it. All right. It is an Australian film, 1986.
Yes.
Okay. It kind of like had a Mad Max vibe to me, but maybe that's just the car connection, right? Maybe people from Australia let us know, like, are you like really into classic cars? Is it a thing? But yeah, right. So we enter this like dystopian society where I guess like gangs of teenagers like roam the streets.
Yeah, pretty much.
Something's going on with the tow truck drivers and making money hauling the car crashes and the dead bodies in, because our protagonist Krabs' older brother has this job, and it's like a job that our main character kind of like aspires to. Like it comes with like a level of status and stuff like that. And he really wants to be like his older brother. Like there's this desire to be bigger, stronger, that kind of thing. But ultimately, he borrows the brother's classic car, takes his girlfriend to a drive-in movie theater. During the movie theater, the police steal 2 of the car's tires, and now our characters are trapped at this movie theater. There's no way to leave or contact. Because it's illegal to be walking on the road. You can't drive the car out. And the guy who runs the drive-in is very, sorry, it's the way things are. And it does kind of act as this like microcosm for civilization and society, seeing these people basically trapped in what's basically like a refugee or concentration camp, right? Full of these like rebellious teenagers of the 80s, and while one of our characters tries to, escape and work on that, another character we watch sort of like get won over and assimilate into this culture. And then after spending an indeterminate amount of time there, we get some new arrivals, and it's a group of like Asian immigrants or refugees being put into this camp as well. And very quickly, like racial issues emerge. Racism regards to like all the white people need to come together and have a meeting, and how great life was before these people came, and if we could just get rid of them, and like once that emerged in the third act, I was like, oh, okay, I can see some societal stuff here. But then while that's happening, right, we do have Krabs, because they thought he had crabs once. What a great name. A daring escape, right? Where he turns against his captors and is able to achieve his freedom, and his girlfriend chooses to remain, right? And we're kind of left with him kind of, I don't know if it's driving off into the sunset, but it's that kind of feel, Oh
yeah. I liken it to the ending, almost to the ending of like the original Dawn of the Dead, where it's like, they get the helicopter off the mall. It's like, okay, they don't have a lot of gas, not really sure where they're gonna go, but it's just about having that one more day kind of mentality.
You gotta try. That optimism. There's a hope, a glimmer,
Because they make it clear at the beginning of the movie, society, there's like all those chyrons that kind of come up to say all these global events. And it's definitely heavily implied that society has broken down to the point where a lot of government authority is kind of gone, and you have private business. Everybody's doing their own thing. Like, his older brother is this scavenger kind of guy. The car wrecks are there. The cops literally do, when a roaming gang of guys called the Car Boys that literally just steal from these scenes come, the cops say, hey, that's your problem. They don't even deal with it.
You're the tow truck guy. You got to deal with the gang.
Exactly. And if anything, the cops turn out to be a predatory force where, the entire reason Krabs and his girlfriend are stuck in the drive-in is because they are taking the wheels probably to pawn them off, And it's definitely a reflection of what we have in society, where you kind of feel like you can't trust your authority figures. Not only are they not protecting you the way they're supposed to, a lot of times they turn out to be the people who are going to actively put you in those bad positions. And it's really hard. And I remember watching it at first. I almost thought it was going to be like a horror movie. Like, if you look at the cover art for Dead End Drive-In, there's this face that's not a character who's in the movie. When you mentioned the
cover, I was like, I want to ask about that. Because,
it's like this weird Harlequin guy. That's not anybody in the movie. I thought it was going to be some roaming slasher thing.
Sort of looks like the Crow.
Yeah, exactly. like some proto-Crow guy was going to be killing people at the drive-in. Turns out it's like, they're just stuck. And it's like, then they go in the morning. It's like, hey, so what do we do? It's like, oh, here's your tickets for meals.
Here are your meal tickets. You get 30.
You just live here now. And it's, but like we talked about it, I think a little off mic. And at first, it is obviously clear that's supposed to be a bit of a reference for like what it's like to live in a society where where nobody is helping anybody and things are just rapidly deteriorating. But when it really becomes clear and it really happens right at the third act. It's a 90-minute film, and this happens around 60-minute mark, is when the refugees come in. And to Krabsy's credit, first of all, he's one of the only people who's constantly like, from the jump, he's like, I'm getting out of here. I don't want to live here. This sucks. This is a slum. And like when the refugees come in, he's one of the only people being like, why is what? They're in here with us. Right. They are not contributing to the problem. The problem are the people who put the fence around us. And he's one of the only people who's willing to just acknowledge, they're not our enemy. I'm not gonna fight them. I'm just trying to get some tires and some petrol and get the heck out of here.
Yeah, he is the voice of reason, and it is kind of like unclear where that's coming from with him though. I wish there would have been a little more to set that up. But I get it. He's a nice guy. Like at the end of the day, I can buy it.
Yeah.
But
Also wish Carmen like hadn't. I almost feel like she too easily accepts her fate.
Yeah.
And I understand that there is a purpose to that, because she's basically representing people who live in these conditions. Like, listen, there's people who are living in parts of this country alone, let alone the world, that make what we see in Dead End Drive-In look just fine.
Yeah.
And they kind of resign themselves to that fate, because unfortunately there is just no way for them to get themselves out of it. But yeah, in the matter of this movie, there is a part of me that's like, it feels like she, like, within day 2, she's just like, well, we live here now. I'm like, all right.
As soon as they did her hair in the bathroom.
Yeah, that was all it took. She's like, well, I've got my gal
springs.
pals now.
She got some shocks in her hair or something, and she was on board. She was won over. Whereas like he resists it, even when like, you know, the male equivalent characters try to like, you know, bring him into their group. Like he's not with it.
Yeah.
And yeah, right. Like you know, the drive-in is our society, right? Which is difficult and antagonistic to a lot of people, if not everyone, right? And what happens is we, instead of blaming the real problem, we start and blame each other, right?
Yeah.
You know, like, which in the movie, it's I guess the corporations that have privatized everything that are running, you know, this. And again, in our society, we've got that too, right? We lead the world in incarcerated individuals, right? And our prison system is a private industry, right? It's a business. You know, we privatize that.
It's money making.
Yeah.
It's technically, I mean, it's man, we're gonna get into some really heavy stuff here, but like technically, the 13th Amendment that abolishes slavery, like if you actually read it, it's like unless you're in prison, then you're totally cool to be like slave labor is still hell. During the pandemic, we were making so much sanitizer in New York State was getting made in the prisons.
Yep.
You know, that way they were like advertising it. It's like, yeah, this is what we got the prisoners doing while we're not doing anything to protect them from COVID.
Yeah.
We're making sure they can make the sanitizer for you to keep your hands sanitized and feel safe. It's like, you know, that like I can't think of a better way to sum up a dystopia. You know, it's like, and it's unfortunately at this point, it's a meme. It's a common thing everybody says is that we are living in a dystopia. And I think these films, it's such a bummer to watch these films that were made like all these decades ago and be like, oh yeah, no, I see all that. Like, yeah, that's happening right now.
You see it then, right? But do you see it here? Do you see it now, right in front of your face, right? Because that's what film is trying to do, right? It's trying to give you the distance so that you can actually see yourself, right? Like that mirror that film acts as, right? It projects, right? Oh, here's a warning about the future, but it also reflects, right? Here's literally what's happening right now around you. Can you see that too? Yeah,
you want to try to avoid this. You don't want this. This is what's if what we're doing right now keeps happening, this is what it's going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So change it now. Like it's always supposed to be kind of a warning, you know, but
because I would argue a central idea we can pull out from both of these films, one of them is definitely that like society is a prison in both films, right?
Absolutely.
And that's, you know, kind of what can be applied to today, right? The rules and everything else, right? As much as they're said that they're there for people's protection, right? Like there is a bit of confinement and imprisonment that happens as others enforce rules on others and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I wish we had more answers or more like, well, here's what we should do. But we're running out of time. And B, I don't know if we even have if any of us have any hard answers right now. I mean, it's a precarious world we live in. It's a very, very precarious and turbulent time.
And, you know, to anyone who's listening, Chris and I talked about not ending this on a downer note. And I mean, but I think, you know, I'll say like, watch more of these movies, right? Because the more aware people are, right? The more you look at these fictional societies and the common elements that are popping up in them and the different ways these filmmakers are showing that stuff to us, maybe the more aware of our own surroundings and situation we'll become. And maybe together, as Robert De Niro's character in the movie says, right, we're all in it together. Yeah. Right. Maybe that's the way through, right? Is forward.
I agree.
Together.
I agree. I think it's always important to remember that we are truly all we have, and we need to we need to start appreciating that resource more. You know, we need to start taking stock of it better.
Yeah, no, couldn't have said it better myself.
Yep.
All right, well, thank you. This has been
Thanks for having
Real Reflections, Society's cinema
societal mirror.
Yeah. We'll get it right one of these times.
We'll do. Yeah. Hey, this is the first episode. We're just getting off the tarmac here.
Yeah.
All right. We'll tighten it up next time, folks. Don't you worry.
All right. Well, next week we'll solve the crisis in the Middle East. So
Exactly.
Stay tuned. I'm Kevin.
I'm Chris.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good one.